Today's sermon is titled The Mother of All Things, and that is taken and inspired by a quote from Lao-Tzu in the Tao Te Ching, or rather one of his poets, aside from the Tao Te Ching. And I'm going to circle back to that at the end. But there are three things that I want to touch on this morning that come under the title of Mother. The first one is the origins of Mother's Day, because it seems very apropos to where we find ourselves now. And I'll get back to that in a moment. The second is I've lovingly called the badass mother, and I will explain in due course. And then the third is the mother without and the mother within. So let's start with, it seemed appropriate to do so, the origins of Mother's Day. So for those historians or those who know this story, apologies, but I'm sure you'll agree with me that it seems quite timeless that we talk about it today of all days in the time that we're in. As you may know, the concept of Mother's Day started in the 19th century in the US, and it was during the years before the Civil War. And there were clubs, as they were affectionately known, where women gathered together to teach each other how to properly care for their children. And later, these clubs would grow in their numbers and spread across the various states and became a unifying force in regions of the country that later, after the Civil War, remained divided. And what they would do is, instead of just teaching about motherhood, they would gather together Union and Confederate soldiers to promote reconciliation. Imagine. And then later, the abolitionist and suffragette Julia Ward Howe, who had campaigned for a Mother's Peace Day. She wanted it to be celebrated every year, and she was campaigning for it to be on June 2nd every year. And in 1870, she wrote what she titled Mother's Day Proclamation. And it was a call to action that asked mothers to unite in promoting world peace. As I read it, and it's part of the reason why I wanted to share it with you today, her words are eerily, and might I say, shamefully still relevant to where we find ourselves 150 years later. Now, I will post this on our social media for you to enjoy later. But what I'd like to do is to read it to you, and later when we have our coffee hour, I'd love to ask you which of her lines, which of her sentiments might have landed with you. So I'm going to quote directly from her proclamation. And it was delivered in Boston in 1870, and it goes like this. Arise then, women of this day. Arise, all women who have hearts, whether our baptism be that of water or of tears. Say firmly, we will not have great questions decided by irrelevant agencies. Our husbands shall not come to us reeking with carnage for caresses and applause. Our sons shall not be taken from us to unlearn all that we have been able to teach them of charity, mercy, and patience. We, women of one country, will be too tender of those of another country to allow our sons to be trained to injure theirs. From the bosom of the devastated earth, a voice goes up with our own. It says, disarm, disarm. The sword of murder is not the balance of justice. Blood does not wipe out dishonor, nor violence vindicate possession. As men have often forsaken the plow and the anvil at the summons of war, let women now leave all that may be left of home for a great and earnest day of counsel. Let them meet first as women to bewail and commemorate the dead. Let them solemnly take counsel with each other as to the means whereby the great human family can live in peace, each bearing after his own kind the sacred impress, not of Caesar, but of God. In the name of womanhood and of humanity, I earnestly ask that a general congress of women without limit of nationality may be appointed and held at some place deemed most convenient and at the earliest period consistent with its objects, to promote the alliance of the different nationalities, the amicable settlement of international questions, and the great and general interests of peace. I don't know about you, but reading that and knowing that she was the precursor to Mother's Day made today feel even more poignant. So thank you for allowing me to share that with you, and I will post it on our social media for you to read later at your leisure, if you don't, in fact, already know it already. The second thing I wanted to share with you is that I'm sure many of you feel the same slight cynicism that I feel sometimes, which is that Mother's Day can be romanticized and what I like to call hallmarky and a bit fluffy. But I wanted to focus on what I called earlier the badass. And any of you who have studied or know of Hinduism will be familiar, I think, with this name, the goddess Durga. Now, she is a powerful entity who, according to Hindu tradition, is the goddess waging war against evil, an evil that lies inside of us, as well as the evil that tries to harm us from the outside. And to understand the power of Durga is to understand your own power. And that's what I wanted to touch on briefly today. Durga is the righteous, fearless, protective mother of the universe, the all-powerful embodiment of Shakti, which I'm sure many of you know is the Sanskrit word for energy, the life force. She is and forms and exudes the creative feminine energy who brought the universe into being. And she wages war against the corruption of the human spirit. Her name in Sanskrit, Durga, means inaccessible fortress, or a place that is difficult to overrun. And her name is indicative of her fierce, powerful nature. Much like a mama bear, Durga is a powerful and unstoppable force when it comes to protecting all that is good and pure in the universe and within all of us. She is also referred to as the one who takes us through difficulties and the one who eliminates our suffering. On a metaphysical and metaphorical level, that suffering could be so many things, of course. The destructive qualities of our ego, to name but a few: greed, pride, hypocrisy, arrogance, anger. She's there to defeat and help us defeat those negative qualities that ruin us and humanity, our spiritual serenity and our clarity of thought. And I would love for you at the end of today's service, if you can, just Google a picture of her and you'll see she has many arms. The number of arms sometimes differs, but what she's always depicted with are certain objects that are sort of universal and always the same. She holds a discus to symbolize her rule over the world. She holds a shell to represent that sound of Om, the sound of creation itself. She holds a lotus in her hand, one of her hands, which is not fully in bloom, but it symbolizes the promise of all that success that has not yet been achieved, or dreams that have not yet been achieved. And of course, weapons, a sword symbolizing the sharpness of her mind, a bow and arrow, the symbol of her energy and her control, and a thunderbolt symbolizing her power and her will. Now, I mention this because the Great Mother, Durga, visits all of us in our lives at some point or other. And I can point, if I did a timeline in my life, I could point at 4 or 5 moments when I know that Durga, almost like one of those plows that you see, modern plows in the fields that have come and churn up the oil, and they have those almost like hook-like things, and they're digging into the soil and they're ripping the soil out apart in order to bring new life, or create the space for new life, should I say. And we always know when Durga has been in our midst. And I think too, for example, when I was in Sydney, Australia, and everything that I had known in my life, my relationship, the life that I had dreamed of for myself, my settling there. I'd left New York to go there, in fact. Everything that I'd held as mine and my way forward, almost in the blink of an eye, was destroyed, quote unquote. But as I became to see with new eyes and different eyes, that Durga doesn't come only to destroy, but she comes to remove that which no longer serves, so that new life can come. And if you were to chart my story from there, I wouldn't be sitting with you and in front of you now, had that not visitation of Durga not taken place in my life. So there comes, as we know, that gratitude within our souls on this journey, where we actually realize that what we saw earlier as death and destruction and dismay ended up being new life and new purpose, a new way. And finally, I just wanted to end with what I called earlier the mother within and the mother without. In terms of within, and again, I think I feel I'm going to resonate with many of you when I say this, that I've been humbled in writing this and preparing this service for you today, because I realized that I've not tended to the mother within. Self-care. Where have I lapsed in self-care? Too busy, not taking care of my health, bad choices in my diet, poor boundaries, not enough sleep, not saying no and saying yes when perhaps I should have said no. Nurturing. How often do I not tend to the things in me that bring me alive? Allowing openness, vulnerability. Those times when it has been hard for me and us to be vulnerable, to be open to others, to be open to life, to what people and life might want to offer us. But sometimes, for whatever reason, our tendency often is to push away. Whereas perhaps that openness, that vulnerability might give that new thing, that new idea, that new way, space, permission, not giving into our fears. I've never been a mother, but I've been around a lot of mothers. So I do speak to those of you with great humility who have humility and gratitude, actually. And in watching my friends over the years breastfeed and loving that silence that comes during that process between mother and child. And as we know, a baby can't cry when it's feeding, or at least not for long. And in that beautiful transmission, one can receive, and the baby, of course, can hear the mother's heartbeat. And so to bring those moments, almost those feeding moments, into our own lives, however that might be. And therefore, I want to conclude with the poem in which I sent out to everybody earlier this week. Again, back to Lao-Tzu. And imagine us as that baby in that tender moment, feeding and receiving. She listened, and such listening as hers envelops us in such silence that we at last can hear what it is we are meant to be. Thank you all.
If you like this video, please like us on YouTube, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and click on the bell to be notified whenever we post a new video. Thank you.